thanks for the flexibility in making it over to these far more comfortable things. That's why we are redoing. I'm David Main. I'm the communications manager for the bond program. Unfortunately tonight Eric couldn't make it, so I'm here representing PPS along with Donna, who's one of our project managers. And so is there anyone here from the general public that's not on the CPC? That's just here? Okay, great. Again, thanks for being flexible and coming out on tonight and coming here on short notice. I'm going to introduce Abby. She's going to run the meeting for us. And also wanted to let folks know that the public design workshop that had been rescheduled for this Saturday, we are also postponing again because all the schools are going to be closed again. So we're going to set that up sometime in December. We think it'll be the 16th, but we'll get back to you at the end of this month with a solid date and time for that. So, and again, if you have any other questions, you can reach out to me through the Cleveland Bond email.
Great.
See you, Mary.
Thanks, David. Just a couple of housekeeping items. The restrooms are out this door to the right. There's single occupant stalls and shared stalls and all that, so lots of choices. Food over here, help yourself. If you need a place to put your stuff, especially when we start moving around, feel free to just duck into the conference room right behind me. There's a table. Miss anything? Oh, if you haven't grabbed a name tag, we do have name tags over there. We've color-coded them so you can tell who's on the design team. We're all pink. I've got a bunch of my colleagues around the room, some folks you met last time, as well as others. And after Bruce's folks are yellow, so should help you orient yourself. And we're also asking people to fill out what they're a champion for. So it's a little way to get to know folks as you're chatting with them, some of the things that are near and dear to their heart in this process, since we all come at this from a different place. So I like to think of the design process as a bit of a journey. We are just starting this journey and we don't yet know where we are going. So if you think of the last meeting, I think we talked about the trip. We kind of set things up. Today we're going to start packing. We're going to start getting all the things together into your suitcase to help you be ready to understand the process, what we're trying to do here, some of the facts and the context related to the Cleveland modernization, even the word modernization, what that means. So hopefully you leave here today feeling like you really understand what we're doing. And then our next meeting, which will actually be pretty soon, in like 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, we will start to dig into some of the options and trade-offs that are right at hand. So starting to plan that path towards our eventual solution. So let's see. So today we will go through. We have a full agenda. We'll update you on community engagement as well as our process. Do a little bit of visioning exercise to start to flush the vision and goals for the project out. As well as update you on the context of the building, the site, the studies to date, and then show you some of the actual studies of the site. So, our goal is really that we come out of here with a shared understanding of the process, because that's really important for everybody, just a level set that we understand what we're doing right now. That we are creating what I would call preliminary goals for this process. They won't be final until we get more public input, so until we have that next public engagement. A grounding in our process to date and the facts of the site, as well as an understanding of site opportunities. I do know at the last meeting there was sort of some conversation, can we consider other sites, go beyond what PPS owns? At the time we thought that was an option. Through recent news articles and other conversations, PPS has come to understand that Fred Meyer is not necessarily for sale at this point, so we are not going to be studying it tonight. If that changes, we will certainly jump right back in and start looking at it. So here's the main portion of our team who's been working on the project to date. We do have some other folks here. We also have a few people who are out, sick or otherwise. So like I said, we all name tags, so feel free to come up and chat. And I'm going to just tee off what we're doing with engagement and then turn it over to After Bruce in a moment. So it is, I guess what I want to start with is the CPC, the Comprehensive Planning Committee. So all of you, And our task is to help you synthesize information and make recommendations for the eventual solution for Cleveland. And help, this is straight from the charter, develop an equitable and integrated comprehensive plan. So the way we do that is to give you information so that you can collect and synthesize this information from the general public. And so it's our job to make sure that you get these extra voices. So we will be working directly with the school, so with school-based groups and district-based groups to bring you more facts about the building. We'll be working with the wide public at open houses. And then we will also be really focusing with a group of people from the community whose voices are not usually centered in this process. And that's really important for us because while this group will have a lot of information synthesized, that information, we need more input than just what this group knows from their lived experience. So I'd like to turn it over to After Bruce to walk through that process.
Yes. Do we have slides?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Oh, yeah, I can use them.
Yes.
Do you want me to?
Yeah. You
Okay,
can-
I'll just talk over this one a little
Yeah.
bit. So there are a couple different pieces in different areas that this process will take, but we at After Bruce were partnered with Malum and Petretti to help do engagement to make sure that we are including all voices, specifically groups from communities who are not usually represented in decision-making processes, and also hearing from all of you. So we are a group that's coming in just to make sure we're collecting everything. So there's not just like data coming in from one side and not the other, and then also looking at community groups being you all, the general public, but also student groups, folks who work at the school, community organizations that are in the Cleveland neighborhood, Cleveland families, also neighbors, business associations, just all of the folks that are surrounding Cleveland who might be impacted by this design process.
Yes, okay, so After Bruce, we both work there. My name is Rhonda. I wasn't on the screen before, but you see me in front of you right now. So we are human-centered. That means we really want to focus on the people that we are connecting with and serving. We also really want to make sure that the projects that After Bruce takes on are community-based and focused, social justice focused, or really with deep roots in the community. Our founder is an Asian woman who grew up in Portland. She's also queer, so we touch a lot of communities that are often underrepresented or affected by systemic inequality. And when we do work, we work with collaborators that have similar mindsets, that we are human-centered, we're relationally focused, and really just want to make sure that we hear what people say and then are able to relate it back to them. With that, so our community engagement focuses are, we take a trauma informed lens, which means that we really watch our language that we would say. A classic example is there's a phrase, kill two birds with a stone, but instead feed two birds with a scone. So, just little changes like that can actually make a pretty big difference when you're removing violence from language that is really common in our vernacular. And another element that I'll add is that most of the outreach that I'm directly a part of is with community-based organizations. So those are folks that are already entrenched in the community, that they are doing the work every single day. So we look to those leaders to say, hey, what do you need? What do your communities need? Instead of us saying, oh, this is what we think that you need. We really want it to be a nice back and forth. I'll pass it back to Maria.
Yeah, and so through our landscape scan and through like our analysis of where we should be going outside, well, I shouldn't say outside, including the CPC and all of the groups that are here and that we are working with, we recognize that there are some targeted communities that we should really be looking at working with. And so some of those groups are leaders at organizations directly affecting families that are part of Cleveland High School, affinity group advisors and student leaders, so that's like the leaders of many student groups at Cleveland High School, that we should be focusing on immigrant and refugee community members, disability community, Latin and Asian American students, Black and Indigenous students, students and families of color, caretakers of students in special education, and special education staff. And we know that by us working with all of you and including making special intentional connections with these specific communities, that we will create a more equitable process. So what community engagement might look like, or does look like, or will look like, is using some very specific practices, like having stakeholder interviews. And that's where we have a list of specific communities that we, it's more of like having a one-on-one interview, and we're asking very intentional questions, and we're using those responses directly for data that we send over to the design team. So an example of a person that we are doing a stakeholder interview with is the principal. Yeah. But I was like, I thought you were like gonna say something else. And also the person who's leading the student groups is also here. So just there are specific people that we know will have deeper insight. So when we do stakeholder interviews, that's how we get I think very deep insights, but also it's deeper than doing something like a community listening session. And did you have a question, or are you just okay?
Well, I do actually.
Okay.
I think you're getting to it though. So.
Okay. I want to hear it. I'm so nosy. I'm nosy.
It was just like I was just interested in just kind of earlier, like I know that it's been hard to reach marginalized communities in the past and like other PPS initiatives. So I was just wondering like how specifically are you going to? Is it just through the organizations, or is there more of an outreach than that?
It's more of an outreach than that.
Okay.
So we have organizations that we are reaching out to. So I think something that's very specific about After Bruce, and I think what Rhonda was mentioning, is that all of us are actually community engagement practitioners, like in communities. Like I've been doing community engagement for 20 years. I know that, I mean, it's hard to tell, but so what that means is that I've been just working with community, like my friends, like I just call up my best friend and be like, girl, I need the phone number to so-and-so, can you plug me in with this specific community? So it's just the same way that any other workforce, operates. Like if you're an architect, like the way that Malum and Petretti connected to do this process together. So it's the same way with community engagement practitioners. So we all kind of work together, but we are not just reaching out to orgs. We're also reaching out. So in my past life, I also worked for the neighborhood system. So I have deep roots with like neighborhoods and with neighborhood association chairs and business association folks. So so that's like another group of folks that we're working with. Another group is just people in apartments, people that live in the neighborhood. So we have like many different ways, and other staff that are just working to make connections. So we've been doing it together. I mean, I think this is going into the second year of us like working as a team, doing things inside and outside of After Bruce. So so we got your back. So I just want to talk a little bit, well, I guess quickly, about some of these other strategies that we use. I think community listening sessions is one of my favorite strategies that we use, because it includes many people. And I have some notes just because I want to make sure that I talk about like the really important pieces here. And some of this definition, and from previous work that we did, we really leaned in on definitions that came from OHSU, because OHSU is one of the first organizations, and hospitals and schools and all of the things that OHSU is, that started doing listening sessions using a framework that we really modeled a lot of our work from. And so part of what their definition is that a listening session is similar to a focus group, and it's a type of facilitated discussion with a group of people designed to collect information about their experiences. And so we know that in listening sessions offer us the opportunities to gain insights, but not only gain insights, it's also a way that we're able to build relationships with people. So once you spend like 2 hours in a group with these random folks and like us, like we're spending time together and we're asking, you know, these deep questions and we're talking about things and we're being vulnerable, sometimes having food together, you end up building a deeper relationship and you end up building trust. And we'll talk a little bit later, I think in the next slide, about how we use the things that come from listening sessions. But I love listening sessions. They're a way to reach many different organizations and communities from different areas and bring together like a synthesized document. So another thing that we're gonna be doing is getting surveys out. So that's another way that we'll be able to reach out to a lot of folks without having to like focus just on one community group, where it's something that can go out to many people at once, and also developing facilitators guides. One more thing that I wanted to say about the last slide that isn't listed is that we'll also be hosting, I believe, 2 office hours, and what office hours are educational, like open houses. So it's not so much where we are collecting data from folks, it's where we're doing more reporting out, like, hey, this is what has happened so far, this is what we're doing, this is how the community has been involved. So office hours are informational sessions. So moving on to our next slide here, we have our wonderful feedback loop. And this feedback loop is very interesting because you can see that it doesn't end. It's continuous, right? And so that's the point of this feedback loop, because it shows how like very deeply interconnected all of these communities are. So it shows like us here, but it also shows how we're connecting with the community-based organizations, we're connecting with the design team, and it also shows how all of you and all of these other groups, how everyone is connected. So we are just going to be continuing the conversation by collecting data, but also sharing data, and we want that from all of you as well. So that's why the feedback loop is very cool, wacky, never ending. It's like affinity symbols everywhere. Very cool. And the last thing that I would say to about this is that we have a couple different things that we want to make sure you all know that we will offer with this feedback loop. And with this feedback loop, we know that we will be able to facilitate effective communication with you all. We'll be conveying information, updates, and resources in a clear and accessible manner. The second thing is that we know that our feedback with you all will be collaborative. So we will always be collaborative with community members, and we will always take whatever needs you need us to take. We will always value your needs. And also like challenges. When people have challenges, like we'll be able to talk about them. If you want to talk about any challenges you're having, it's okay to bring those things to us, and it will just go through the feedback loop and get to the design team or to PPS or where it needs to go in the process. And also just letting folks know that all of these things, the whole process of having this type of open continuous feedback loop is to help everyone be able to get the most that they can, and to help us get the most that we can out of the decision-making process. And the last piece is that we will provide referrals if people need access to materials that they cannot access. So maybe if they need something in another language, or something needs to be dropped off to their home, or whatever folks need in terms of having access to the information that we're sharing. So we want to make sure that folks know that there's alternative formats to anything that we will be sharing, and any feedback that we'll be collecting, or information that we will be giving out. And then this last piece here, Abby, I know you wanted to talk about this a little bit, but I just wanted to say, I always have a lot of things to say, so I'm sorry. I'm a talker, definitely. One thing I just wanted to mention to you all too is just from after Bruce's where we stand and where we sit in this process, just letting folks know that while we're collecting feedback, so if that's from the stakeholder interviews, listening sessions, surveys, or even in forums like this where folks are just letting me or Rhonda know something, that we will make sure that we synthesize whatever data or feedback that you're giving to us, and what that means is that we'll just organize your thoughts and organize things and categorize them and make sure that they get over to the design team. And that's a process that we'll be going through throughout this process. So every time that we receive data, feedback, challenges, anything that we receive, that part of that feedback loop will be that we give the findings over to the design team and they will put it into their presentations. So,
Thank you.
thank you, Abby.
That's great. So yeah, at CPC 1, we asked you all some ideas about engagement. You gave us a bunch of ideas both on who to reach out to and how to reach out and how to share back information with the community. So we've taken all of those, and we'll distribute this slide deck after the meeting, and there are links in it, so there's like a whole list of everything you shared with us at the back. So if you're curious, you will always have that data. It's always going to be more data than we can cover in our 2-hour meetings, so we'll try to give you the big picture and then let you dig in as you want.
I do want to know who said free food for the high schoolers. Is that high schoolers?
Oh,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
yeah. We've got free food and comfy seating is our new thing.
They were under people
No brainer. I have a separate pizza budget, just so.
All right, you may have to call on that. Great, so I'm gonna take just like a couple moments, go through some slides, make sure we're all clear on the path we're on and some of the words that we're using in this path. So this is the super broad brush of the process. So there is a process that has happened. That was the conceptual master plan. Elisa is gonna share a few highlights of that in a bit. There's the process we're in right now, which is the yellow process, the comprehensive plan. And there's the process that is yet to come, which is the design process, the bond that will fund construction and actual construction. You'll notice we don't have dates on that because we don't know yet when that construction will happen or when the school will open. Lots of variables. But let's focus on our yellow area. And first of all, this word modernization. So it's not a household word, it's not a word I learned in architecture school, but it's a word PPS uses to describe sort of rebuilding or the high schools. So this will either be a complete gut and remodel and addition of the existing building, or it will be a completely new school. And the goal is really to create modern learning environments, make sure we have a very safe, healthy, active building that truly supports Cleveland's needs, the community's needs, and is in alignment with a lot of the background documents that PBS has been developing over the many years of the bond program. So when you get your PDF stack, if you want to dig into what those details are, there are links. And, those links have links to other links. So there's a lot there. PPS has also organized a diagram that talks about all the other influences that come into a building design process. I mean, building code, zoning, all sorts of factors that we'll be balancing somewhat during this process and definitely as we get to the design phase. Happy to dig into those as appropriate. So, I think one of the hardest things to do in design is imagine something you've never experienced before, and so your current experience of Cleveland is probably colored in certain ways by its age and its paint color and all those things. So a couple images on the right, you see Grant High School. This is what the entryway used to look like when you walked into the building. This is what it looks like now. This is what it looked like during construction. So a lot of things can happen. Full transformation can happen. So whether or not we keep portions of the existing building, you can rest assured that they will be transformed. Here's some examples of recent projects, both new and renovation addition projects that PPS has done with the bonds. And essentially, when we say modernization, we mean everything will essentially be new again. We may be keeping a few aspects of a building if we keep portions of it, but everything inside is going to feel fresh and new, and the technology will be new. lighting will be new, athletics facilities will be upgraded, etc. So the process we're in right now, we're calling the comprehensive planning process, which is a process, and it also ends in a plan that we will call the comprehensive plan that we will publish. It will be on paper, it will be a PDF, and it will be a kind of a guidebook. It's very high level. It's going to talk about generally where things are, generally what they should do. It's not going to get into the nitty-gritty details of exactly what it's doing. We may not even know what material the building is built out of, but we'll probably know where the building is. We'll probably know if it's 2 stories tall or 6 stories tall. So we'll get to some of those answers in this process. After this process comes a whole nother process, which is called the design phase process. And that is also a process and a plan. The difference is the outcome, the plan that comes out of that will actually be buildable. It will be the construction documents, the blueprints that the contractor takes and builds into a real building. So a lot more detail to come after this process. So in the next few months, we all are going to be digging into the sites. Cleveland has 3 sites right now. We'll be looking at the best and highest use of each site, how to improve safety in and around campus, what even goes on these sites, what are our site program elements, what are our athletic fields, etc., how we're doing parking, bike parking. We'll be thinking about the building, whether or not we retain it, the location and height, and then we'll also really be thinking about priorities. What is the vision? What are the goals? Who are we serving? How do we support Cleveland students and the community for the next 100 years? So again, here's a little more detailed part. So here we are today, giving you a lot of context and facts, packing that bag, getting us ready for the journey, and then our next meeting, early December, will focus a lot more on options, trade-offs that we'll be making along the way. So with that, I want to turn it over to Hannah.
Hi everyone, I'm Hannah. I think I'm going to try to continue your analogy here and say one of the goals for this process is to develop a vision that we include as part of the comprehensive plan, maybe like the luggage tag on the suitcase. But, you know, I think after Bruce talked to you all about this idea of the feedback loop, so we're collecting input from you, we're synthesizing it, and we're coming back to you to say like, hey, here's what we heard, did we get it right? So last time we met at CPC 1, we asked the question, what would success look like for this project? We've excerpted just a few of the comments here. There is a link to the full list of them at the end of the presentation, but we were really starting to see themes around these ones. So a building that includes a lot of trauma and design, a building that really needs a reasonable budget and schedule, one where there's a high level of approval for the final design, one where the building is a joy to the community and that is really adding to the streetscape. And I think ultimately there was quite a lot just around students feeling safe, welcome, and successful at the school. So we took all those comments, and from those, what we are doing is we're identifying emerging themes that will really serve as the criteria or the framework we can evaluate the site planning options against. What we're looking at here are these, just a first pass of what these emerging themes might be. Each of these is scaled relative to the amount of feedback we've heard around that theme. So just for example, the largest one, there were around 18 comments that were all centered around project, process, and outcomes. So those were things like a successful bond, minimal disruption to students, and again, ones around kind of successful project, budget, and schedule. We also heard a lot of support for building design and presence, for supporting students and staff, for safety and site design, and support for sustainability, equity, and then that the project itself has a lot of support for and from the community. So again, just for like a relative scale, the yellow had like 17 or 18 comments, and sustainability had 4. Abby talked about the 2019 conceptual master plan. So we compared what we heard then with what we heard now. And each of these highlighted in pink are ones that we heard in 2019. So where we had overlap were comments and thinking around safety, around building design and presence, equity, and supporting students and staff. And then the new themes are the ones that are grayed out, but those are site design, the process, project process and outcomes, sustainability, and the support for and from the community. If you're curious how we categorize your comment, that's also in the linked appendix, so you'll see where your comment falls relative come back to what those themes actually mean, but first we want to talk to you all and hear from you about what aspects of the community are unique, which spaces and places the community values, and how Cleveland might be the center of community. And again, we're synthesizing all of this input to help shape what those criteria are. So we'll continue to come back to you and say, hey, do these criteria feel right? Are we missing anything? But this is the first prompt, and so I think at each table, you'll see that there are blackboards there that if you flip them over, have room to add post-it notes. We'll ask you all to get up if you're not at one of those tables.
There's also one contiguous site. So we have the site in the middle, which is where the main building is. We have a parking lot just to the west that's an acre. And then a couple of blocks down, we have the field site that is 6.5 acres. And I'm sure many of you know that walk very well. So here we actually have an image of what might look familiar to you. And this is Cleveland High School. Back in the time that it was built, it was known as Clinton Kelly High School of Commerce. And we're just gonna look a little bit at the history here. So back in the 1860s, there was an Oregon pioneer by the name of Clinton Kelly that actually donated this land to Multnomah County School District at the time to use as an educational facility. So there was an elementary school on the property. In 1916, the High School of Commerce was actually established across the river on the west side with the Shattuck School Building. And then in 1929, what we know today as Cleveland High School was actually built on the existing site. It was constructed as the Clinton Kelly High School of Commerce. It was designed by George C. Jones, who was actually the architect for Portland Public Schools at the time and designed many buildings there. It was built in the classic revival style, and over the years there were a number of additions that were added to the building, including the gymnasium, the shop, and the classroom additions through the 50s and 60s. And we can also see here that in 1948 is when that school was renamed to Grover Cleveland High School. So jumping us forward, what we really want to share here is that based on the city of Portland's tiers of influence, that it is actually considered a significant resource, but that is the lowest tier on the city of Portland's range. And you can see that over here that's shown on the right. We also see that it is eligible and contributing based on the State Historic Preservation Office, or what we call SHPO. So what we know is that SHPO actually does not approve or deny work. So although we will be working with them, they don't actually say, you have to do this or you can't do that. We also know that the building is not required to be kept. So what we do know is that we will be working with SHPO through this process, and we'll be consulting with them throughout the design phase, starting from the very beginning, through schematic design and design development, and we will be submitting an application to them. And what they will actually help us to do is to create mitigation requirements that would be required to offset, and that's based on whatever we do with the historic structure. So, yes.
Is the buildings kept, or is it either way, it's demolished or kept? If you need to work with SHPO?
It's either way. Either way, we would be required to work with SHPO. If we keep the building, there will be less mitigation measures. If we get rid of the building altogether, then they will require more mitigation. So that's essentially what that process is. So it's really just understanding how much we're affecting the building will help us to work with them to determine what the requirements are for that. So here we can actually see what we have determined based on a 2009 evaluation, what is considered to be historically significant at Cleveland High School. And what what is shown here is that actually it's the original 1929 building that's considered to be historically significant. In the yellow and the red dotted outline, that's actually moderate significance. So that's where the original gymnasium used to be, that is now infilled with classrooms. And we see that all of the additions that occurred in the 50s and 60s are actually non-contributing factors. So no significance there at all. Historically, historically, you may love it. It might be great. And then just to talk about the fact that there are character defining features that have been identified, and we do have a historic consultant that we're working with that we will actually bring to the next meeting that is doing an assessment, and we will share what those features actually are. So now we wanted to just quickly talk about that process that Abby mentioned, which was the conceptual master plan that was done back in 2019. And so that process, there was approximately 50 members, so very similar in size to this process. We did have 4 CMPC meetings, different than our CPC meetings, with that process. We had 5 steering committee meetings, student engagement session, community forum, as well as an open house. So this process was the first step to really start to identify what we would be looking at to put toward the bond. So when we started that process, we were asking questions such as you see here, identify places that the community values, identify places of memory or historic value, and where is change necessary. And as Abby and Hannah mentioned, there are certainly new priorities that we are looking at based on what we heard from this group about what success would look like. But we did want to just bring back what we had heard back in 2019 because there is some crossover. And here we see support learning for all, provide flexibility, create comfortable environments, and promote connectivity. These also in size relate to the responses that we got. I just really wanted to highlight this promote connectivity because I think that this is the part that is really tying to what we are hearing with safety and really understanding how we'll use the sites that we currently have and what are those connections that we can make across 3 disparate sites. All right, so where we left off in that process was that we had really looked at a number of different iterations. It's less truly about what is shown here, but really about what the context was with historic versus new. So I think that's still a question that we're all gonna be thinking about as we move forward, as well as distributed versus consolidated. And that's talking about whether we can build a building on a single site or if we need to distribute across the 3 sites that PPS currently has. So there's also a varying degree that we looked at back then. There was a partial historic where we took away more of the historic fabric that we saw was historically significant. There was taking the whole thing down where we were building brand new on a single site, and then there was where we were actually keeping all of the historically significant parts of Cleveland and building across to the other side of the site. And what we had learned at that time is that there really wasn't consensus and that we needed to do more study, which is why we are all here. And we will continue to take a look at these components. I've got one more here. So just to say that there was a lot of discussion about how we actually create those connections and what is that safety factor. So taking a look at crossing 26th Avenue, thinking about crossing Powell to get over to the park. Is there a connection that we can enhance that's on Waverly that will take us back to that field? So all of these are things that we'll be considering as we take a look at the new site options. Amanda, Sam, walk us through this.
So we know there's a lot of information that we're reviewing today. We're gonna pivot now. Luke and I are gonna talk about the site studies. So we're gonna build on the process that Elisa was just describing that happened in 2019 and fold in what we know today in 2023 with additional stakeholders and making sure we're gathering their input and really moving forward in an intentional fashion. Again, review kind of where we are in the process. We're in our second meeting together. We have many more meetings to come. And this will not be your only opportunity to talk about how we approach using the sites and properties that Portland Public Schools and Cleveland High School owns currently. This is our first opportunity to start kind of immersing everyone in that information and making sure that we all have a shared understanding of it. We are really just going to focus on the sites, as Abby said earlier, that Cleveland owns. And the great thing is that we see wonderful opportunities for improvements. And we would explicitly today, in discussions that we'll have after we go over some basic information, love to help understand, like from you to help us understand what are the opportunities and challenges of the 3 different approaches to using the property that we're going to put on the table today are in your mind. What are those opportunities and challenges?
So I can ask a question.
Go ahead, yeah.
If you go back, there is a bullet about not investigating sites not in the PPS, and I'm just curious if there's like a why there.
Sure. So right now, we are not looking at sites that PPS doesn't own because nothing else is available. So there's nothing else for sale that we have access to. And so happy to have others, David, I don't know if you want to add anything else to that, but.
Just other than because we don't have other sites available. I mean, we were exploring that, and then it became clear after some discussions that Fred Meyer was not interested in selling it this time, and there's no point in pursuing it because that's not an option. So, I mean, if that changes, then we can go back to that, but that's my understanding.
Is that all of Fred Meyer property or part of it?
Our understanding was all.
Go ahead, yeah.
Our understanding was all of the property was not for sale at this time.
I think there had been preliminary discussions, and then, for whatever reason, then they were like, so.
There had been talk about Burgerville though, and now Target's open up. Are those in play or are those things?
I would say the direction that we've received right now is that since they are not available for sale to us right now, that is not something we're pursuing right now.
And I think my understanding is from the design team, if this is correct, that those properties are not really consequential in terms of how much space they offer. It doesn't really, can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think they're very small. So I think in the next few meetings, if we discover that there's a compelling reason why expanding a site, moving on to Burgerville, moving on to Target would help, I think that's when we would talk to PBS about taking that step. Yeah, we just need to have a reason why we would get the land first. Again, because they're not for sale and they're certainly not cheap.
I mean, the reason is there's not enough space with the zero down,
Well,
right?
and I think that's what we're gonna really investigate in these next, we'll start here and then at the next meeting, we'll really get down to the
Plenty of
analysis.
space if you go up 6 stories.
Sure, yeah, but I mean,
There's still not enough space.
There's no
Well,
green
okay,
space.
so go up eight stories.
Still.
Well, the great thing is that we have plenty of time to have a spirited debate. And this is great, you know, just understanding what people's priorities are, what is coming top of mind for you, what are the concerns, what are the things that are exciting, potentially that could come back.
I just had one other thing on the big circle of community doing land swap, and I think taking the fields and swapping with, Bone Park, is that a discussion?
I think that's a wonderful pivot to our next slide.
But that could be a reason to get the Burgerville property, but then
Yeah. Right, because that's when the recycling, is it 26 between the parking lot and the, so
Yes, so-
Can that P-BOT right away, I know you never talked to me about P-BOT, but could that just be like taken out of commission and built over?
Great conversation, and one that the design team is already starting to investigate. I would say it's not on our agenda today to dig into that in detail, but it is an agenda item for next meeting. And it's okay that we can kind of circle back with it once we have better information to present to everybody. Okay. And just for orientation, since you asked, so everyone's kind of talking about the same thing. So this is existing Cleveland High School, this is 26, this is Powell, and Waverly is the street that connects to the athletics fields, as well as Franklin in different ways, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. All right, I'm gonna move forward, and then we can totally circle back to these items as we keep going. Okay, so this is just a reference point, so everyone has an understanding of what the catchment area, so where students are coming from that attend Cleveland. So it's quite a large area on the east side of Portland, and the existing Cleveland High School main property, parking lot, and athletic fields are right in the center of that catchment area. So just to get a sense of where kids are traveling from, kind of, no matter where you might live in this area.
Do we have numbers on density about where most of the students are coming from? Is there like a heat map?
That's a great question. That's not something that I have access to right now, but it's certainly something we could see if the data exists. I don't know if it does.
We may have that, I would have to check with our,
Yeah.
we do have mapping.
So I know we have Andrew taking notes right now, and we could kind of circle back and be able to provide that information. There we go. Okay, so to get to where we were going here. So today, what we want to do again is just start to immerse us all in the same amount of information and a framework that we will use as we move forward in subsequent meetings in our process to look at approaches to using the properties that PPS and Cleveland High School has control over or a relationship with. So what we're going to focus on today is really getting a shared understanding of the size and the scale of all of these pieces and their relationship to other PPS high school campuses so that we kind of see where we are in that spectrum of scale and size. In order to flesh out that conversation and give us a structure for understanding our options, we are looking at these three sites, which we'll dig into more detail because it's a lot to absorb, but the first approach to the site on the top there is really we're trying to keep these options simple. Site one is about limiting the building to one block. So it's effectively what you have right now for Cleveland High School largely is keeping the building to one block, maintaining the existing parking lot as parking, and continuing to have a relationship with the fields, track and field site. With the potential that there could be some other built element on the field site, but not primarily. Primarily, we're just keeping Cleveland High School program on one block. For site approach 2, same properties, but looking at what Elisa was referencing in one of the comprehensive master plan processes, where we start going, extend past the one block and start including the current parking lot site as an opportunity for built major program that students will be accessing during the school day. For site approach 3, same properties again, but looking at a bigger pivot from the existing conditions and saying, well, you know what, Cleveland High School owns, or Portland Public Schools owns this track and field site, so let's make sure we're pushing the envelope a little bit and see what would happen in this kind of design study process if we moved the main Cleveland High School building to that site. Does that offer enough advantages? Is it worth looking at? What are the challenges? In that case, there would be a secondary decision about what happens with this property. So, go ahead.
So in site 3, would students be able to stay in the building while construction was happening?
That's a great question. I would say that's part of our kind of preliminary idea about even looking at this option was the fact that that is a potential. There's a lot of details we all have to figure out to guarantee anything here, but that is, yes, a potential. Which would mean that students wouldn't necessarily have to go to Marshall, although Marshall is a great campus, and that the schedule of the project wouldn't be as tied to Marshall's availability.
understanding is that there's a huge city water line that's underneath our field, which is why we can't build a foundation that would house a school. Is that,
I would say lots of things, and we will get into some of them here, and we are working with a full slate of consulting engineers on all of these items. And generally, in terms of that block, we wouldn't necessarily do a building on the entire site, but that is the site that would be utilized for it.
So one of the major things about our school, yes, our kids have to walk to the field, but they don't have to cross paths. And many of our kids go to the field each day. If they have the field down here, do you have ways to improve that safety so they don't be crossing paths?
Yep.
Because that's a huge fear, and we've lived through a lot of things together as a community.
And it's super great to highlight these like concerns, and it's top of mind for you. And what we're gonna do is right now, I'm gonna, if it's okay, I'm gonna kind of keep going through these individual options, because we'll dig into each one of them, the opportunities and challenges in more detail in the subsequent slides. And then we have an activity for you after we go through kind of some of this basic information, where just as we did earlier, we had the opportunity to hear from you, record, and document, where your thoughts are and where your input is. That is sort of where we want to focus today, is help us confirm these opportunities and challenges, and to make sure we hear from everyone. We're going to do that in smaller groups so that we can record it properly. And then we're really, again, this is just the start of a conversation about these sites, so that when we come back to you again, we will have made sure that we're addressing the issues that are, top of mind for everyone.
Is there a reason why it's not a possibility to have like a site
Yeah, 2 and 3 combined.
Yeah, I think that'd be good.
Great question. Classic architecture process question. We can hybridize our options. And I would say yes. Everything's possible right now. But what we're trying to do, honestly, just for the clarity of the conversation, is to look at sort of distinct approaches to these sites, so that we can understand what the controlling criteria are.
What about building the new Cleveland on the park site, where you have the fields going
Also,
to three?
yeah, great question. I would say that I might need to phone a friend for PBS to help us. But right now, we knew that was a conversation that has bubbled up in different ways. And right now, Powell Park is not something that is available to us as a building site. It is a Portland Parks and Recreation property. It is not owned by PPS or controlled by PPS. Go ahead.
Well, I would just say, and if I might add, based on our experiences with Grant High School, you guys worked on Grant, you could talk about it. It's sometimes hard to work parks and rec. I'll say it that way, and leave it.
To have a field that's not dangerous, that kind of hard.
I think maybe what David is referring to is, I think the original question
Different
was
problem.
about the building, if I heard it correctly, on the Powell Park site.
Yeah.
And that feels right now, with the information we have presently, like a very large uphill battle that we want to set this process up for success.
Okay.
That feels like not within our capability right now to focus on that.
Developing Powell Park just for athletic fields is a very different conversation than
Yes.
building a school.
Correct, yeah. And that's why, in terms of the site approaches that we're looking at today, the sort of farthest we are going in terms of talking about Powell Park is really about enhancing athletic facilities that are presently already used in some Cleveland programs, and could be improved in partnership with Portland Parks without changing ownership. Does that make sense?
So, Portland Park would still own the field.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is our sort of baseline assumption based on high school projects and how the relationship exists. Okay, so we're gonna jump into just some basic facts about other high schools, campuses within PPS. So upper left here is Cleveland. So the graphic convention that we're using here is the pink filled in is the footprint of Cleveland. So the building that touches the ground, where it touches the ground, that is the footprint and shape of Cleveland from above, in an aerial photo. The dashed pink line in all cases, and we'll get Cleveland here, is the property line that PPS owns. Okay? And then the green represents park space that is not owned by PPS, that is dashed with white here. That's not owned by PPS, but has a relationship to the high school programs in terms of utilization. In some campuses, it's directly adjacent, and in Cleveland's case, it's not physically adjacent, but it is operationally within the school's use. So for Cleveland, what we see is that the footprint, the amount that touches the ground, Cleveland High School building, is 115,000 square feet. Pretty big footprint. And the property itself, when we add together the parking lot across 26, the main building, and the track and field site, is 11.5 acres. Okay. In the upper right, we have Grant High School. You can see the footprint, the pink of Grant, is a pretty different building, right, than Cleveland. It is a low and long building that stretches out into its site. It has a different site. It's a response to its site, right? And Grant is 128,000 at 11.1 acres, so slightly larger footprint, very similar, slightly smaller property owned, yes, for Grant. In the lower left is Franklin High School nearby, and it has the largest footprint, very different building approach, right? Very sprawling compared to Cleveland, and it has a large property of 18.5 acres, and that is again what is within this area and does not include the park itself. And then on Lincoln High School is a considerably smaller footprint. It's 108,000 square feet, so it's a smaller footprint than existing Cleveland, and it's a 10.7 acre property here. Again, a little bit smaller than current Cleveland campus. Is there any questions about that to understand that? Yeah.
Do you know what the student body is at Lincoln compared to Cleveland?
It's a
It's
great
about
question.
the-
I
I
don't
know,
have that
I
data
know.
right now. Do you know?
I'll tell you.
Okay.
It's about the same as ours. Yes.
So like how many?
No, we're sitting around 1,500, and Lincoln's probably sitting around 1,550.
Thank you, that's great information.
Do you know, like, I mean, kind of like, students per square foot?
I don't have that data, but that is a great question. Yeah.
Well, it would be interesting for all of the schools to see, because you hear stories, and this is maybe getting off topic, but it's like as soon as a school is rebuilt, it's too small already. And so it'd be interesting to see this population with the square footage and the acreage. And
Okay, that's great information. I think that's something in terms of like student density or per square foot per student.
Well, and the
that,
footprint versus square footage, I think would be interesting too, because Lincoln is now 4 or 5 stories, right?
Correct.
6, okay. So at 108,000 square foot footprint, can you multiply that by 6 to get it to? No, but you know what I'm getting at?
Yeah, so we'll get more into this
Okay.
at the next meeting, but all modernized PPS sites are working on the same educational specifications, which is a goal for how to create certain standards and similar experiences across all of the projects. So they're all in a very close square footage, which is
Okay.
bigger than the current Cleveland, and they all are designed to fit the same number of students. That may not be the reality at all the sites right now, but that's the basis of the guiding documents that shape.
I tried to read that, it is unreadable.
It is dense.
It's,
You're welcome to our.
We will bring a summary at the next meeting to tell you what we know we need to do.
Yeah. And one thing that I'll just add, what you said, Abby, that's unspoken things here, and most people probably know that like Franklin has been modernized, right? So this is the data post-modernization in terms of footprint. Same with Lincoln, same with Grant. So Cleveland is naturally, because of the comparisons we're making here, it is not yet up to the current. We're in that process, right?
And real quick on the ed spec, getting back to what we've heard last meeting, this meeting about like the buildings already feeling too small. Are in those buildings, are those like up to the ed spec or are those past the ed spec? It'd be nice to know that because like, I kind of look at it as if the ed spec's in some way not like a good reality given what teachers and people are saying in those schools, and that's something we should take.
I would say the SIP is like a great approach that PBS is trying to provide equity across schools and accommodate all needs, but there are always trade-offs and limitation of resources. So I think we can come back to you with some more information about comparisons.
They are being built to 1,700 students.
Thank you.
I just had a comment about Lincoln, it's a much different neighborhood, you know, and I think if we're talking about being inclusive in our neighborhood, doing a 6-story building in the middle of that residential area is kind of in your face, so I think that has to be considered pretty strongly as far as the comparison.
Awesome, go ahead.
I was just saying, like, it's interesting, like, from my perspective, depending on how you come out of this school, like walk outside of Cleveland, you either walk out and you see a neighborhood, or you walk out and you're on Powell Boulevard.
It was a highway, so.
Very
yeah.
highway.
What is the
It doesn't
design
have that same
overlay
residential
and the
flow.
zoning around?
Well, I'm gonna scale
Right, it's
vertical
probably.
scale.
Okay, so I think I'm gonna bring us back. And say that I think it sounds like we're really all teed up to get through a little bit more information and then get to the exercise, so we can make sure these comments are recorded, and so that we can properly respond to them as we come back to you again. Fair? Okay. Okay, so a little bit more information about scale. So we're gonna talk about site 1. To remind everyone, with the site approach 1, we're looking at just like sort of the main Cleveland building block, and what would it look like to continue to keep the main building on that site. We wanna compare to the high school campuses we just looked at. So on the left, we're using Grant as our sort of proxy for a low and long building, right? And by overlaying the footprint and the property line of Grant High School onto Cleveland, we just simply want to show that with that one block, we don't necessarily have the option of doing kind of like a low and long Grant style, building form, right? So probably not a surprise to a lot of people, but just making sure that we're all kind of thinking about the same scale. It's easy to be on site and kind of not really understand how things actually compare scale wise. On the right side is the Lincoln High School property laid over Cleveland, and you can see that the Lincoln building footprint is smaller than the current Cleveland building footprint. Okay, so it just gives you a sense of scale, and to us, we see this as a positive, right? Like we know that there are challenges, and we will unpack all of those, but it's possible. And it's a nice space.
I'm gonna ask you.
Hold on one second, just because I want to make sure everyone's heard.
The Lincoln High School, is that the 1,700 kids?
Correct.
That was done?
Yep.
So Lincoln backs up to the MAC and it's got big buildings. What is the zoning for residential and institutional and the height limitations? It doesn't seem like it can go 6 floors. Maybe my.
They're building an apartment building just right down the street, that's one of the building that's like 5 or 6 stories. So I don't know.
Does it back up the same way to residential?
So I think what we're gonna note for right now, for where we are in the process, is that we should make sure we come back to you when we have later in the presentation here too, some more information about zoning and implications. Is there someone else? Alright, so when we're looking at the Cleveland site, Luke, do you wanna walk through some of the opportunities and then the challenges that we've seen?
Sure. So what you are looking at right now in front of you is a series of site observations. The design team walked the site, recorded what we saw as existing conditions, and we documented a whole lot of different types of information overlaid on each other at the same time. So you're seeing vehicle traffic here, you're seeing pedestrian movement, you're seeing some opportunities which are highlighted in yellow, you're seeing some things that could potentially be challenges or constraints that are highlighted in the kind of pink-red color. Looking kind of high level here, this is for our approach 1. Opportunities, the biggest opportunity of site 1 would be that no students crossing streets need to access major interior spaces. So it's certainly true that we need safe pedestrian crossing across 26th and Powell, but for this scheme, that's only for drop-off, end of day. It wouldn't be for in-between classes and things like that. So thinking about that as a priority, but maybe not as important if we're building directly across the street. The existing track and field can remain in play, in use with no new construction costs. So you can see the arrows to the right, highlighting the 2 primary pedestrian paths to currently access the track and field. And that 3, the CHS Cleveland High School parking lot can be used for the construction staging area across the street. So we have an idea for kind of a preliminary strategy for how to construct a new high school on the site that could help speed up the process. We also have a series of challenges for building on this site. We have a challenging pedestrian connection to the fields via Waverly Street. We're currently exploring studies to improve that pedestrian experience and make that as nice and safe as we can. And we'll be showing that to you in future CPC meetings. Looking at options for improving Powell Boulevard and 26 crossings at varying levels of improvements, whether that means improving things on the ground or taking pedestrians off the ground, potentially. And also a challenge of the site is that the property will need to be rezoned, which requires time and money, but it is necessary given the maximum allowed square footage we can build on the site, as well as the height limit, which has already been discussion right now. But it is feasible and we can do it.
And there is, I'm just gonna add to that since there was a specific question about zoning.
Yes.
There is sort of a, we use the wrong term, but there is a zoning change
Yes.
kind of that has been outlined in a long-term plan for the city for this site, including other sites along Powell, that identifies it as changing to an institutional residential, I believe is the zoning. And so although it is not currently zoned that, we think that there is a very clear pathway for that rezoning, which allows us to go up to a 75-foot height, and we can also go taller than that with land use adjustments.
Yes.
Just want to make sure we are starting to look at that, although that is a further detail that we're kind of going to get into generally today. Okay, now we're going to shift our thinking to looking at the main block, and now we're thinking that the parking lot in this sort of approach to using the properties is now in play in our thinking for putting major program pieces, part of the interior of the building, onto that parking lot. Same comparisons for scale, but now you can see that even if we were to shift that Grant High School footprint over 26th and use the whole property across the street, we're still not, at that scale of a low and long building. We're still kind of in the category of a more dense footprint.
So, same diagram as before with new site considerations, looking at opportunities for this site option, which is to say that we have an opportunity to build additional space across 26th Avenue for building, which can help alleviate some of the potential density concerns that we're hearing. Locating some program over there and spreading it out over a larger area of the site, similar to the previous one. The existing track and field can still remain in use with no cost, but there's a series of challenges. Expanding campus buildings to the other side of 26 has an increased level of pedestrian risk. Not only are students crossing there at the beginning and end of each day, but they're crossing potentially between classes. And how do we do that in a way that is safe and keep students off out of harm's way? So yeah, challenging pedestrian connections through Waverly. Still, that same concern exists here. So we'll be studying that for this team as well. Looking at Powell Boulevard crossing and making sure that improvements are as good as we can make them there. This also has the same zoning considerations, so we would still be rezoning the site. It has the same actual overlay as Site 1, the primary site, so it's the same path to achieving zoning. And then we're kind of assuming that there's going to be a little bit of a higher cost for building more buildings and having additional structure and skin. So kind of assuming this might be a little bit more expensive.
This might be a total no, but is there an option of closing that section and especially if you highlight the old river or something, using the interior space of the building, including that section of 26?
So yeah, thanks for the questions. I think it's one that we're aware of kind of is a interest of people's, and we are also interested in whether we can make that happen. I would say that we're going to come back to you next time with a more explicit conversation about street intersections and crossings and the opportunities that are easy, possible, and unlikely. And so, well, I prejudge what those are, because we're still studying them actively and bringing the right experts to the table to answer that in a sufficient fashion. But I would say that as we've outlined as a challenge, we are aware that there is a concern about pedestrian crossing that is very real and top of mind for people in this option. And we're also aware that it feels like there are easy answers or answers that will address that. And we're gonna study it and unpack the feasibility and the cost and the value of that.
So real fast, when you're showing that you're looking over the parking lot, we wouldn't be losing parking with that design, would we?
I would say that's a further detail that we're just sort of not there yet.
I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
Parking is hard in the neighborhood, so if they're gonna build on that, we have to maintain.
I would say it doesn't necessarily prohibit continued parking on that site or anywhere else on the site. Really the focus is our first order decision that we need to make, which is about where is the building program. And that there are gonna be lots of complexities to all of the decisions we need to make, but where we're trying to focus our energy right now is where is the major building program. With the understanding that we're gonna figure out all of the other stuff.
Can I just follow up, like, so do we know if the soils and all that stuff, like you could do, like underground parking, or is that,
Great question, and it's something that we're gonna look at in the scheme of kind of multiple of these options that isn't necessarily restricted to this particular site approach. And what we'll look at is, what does it buy us, right? Like what is literally in terms of value, right? Do we get something we want by doing that? That is of enough value to the group and to the community. And what is the cost? What is the trade-off we have to make to do so? On a big picture level. Okay, we're gonna keep going so that again we can get to the activity, okay? Okay, site 3. So what we're looking at again in this one, this is the bigger pivot to looking at the track and field site as a potential location for a building. Again, we're just trying to get like a shared sense of scale of how this track and field site scale-wise compared to the main Cleveland High School block. You can see that we get a lot closer to the property available for grant for the lower and longer buildings, with more options for how that building mass might and volume might be shaped. But it's still not quite there, right? So it doesn't just solve all of it, give us all the options, right? But it does, give us different choices to make. And then on the right with the Lincoln High School footprint, you can see again, dense footprint, lots of conversations to have there. But the trade-off that is immediately apparent is open space on the ground floor, or more parking, more other site-based elements when we do a more dense building.
In this scheme, where do the fields go in that approach?
Great question. We're going to talk about that in campus. Go ahead.
Yeah, so for this site, there's a few different considerations. The large opportunity being that building on this property would allow students to stay at the current Cleveland High School while this is being constructed, which could potentially streamline the construction schedule and not have to have students locate temporarily on site. It might be possible to co-locate some building in some fields. And if the Cleveland High School building is relocated here, it removes some risks that are inherent in modernizing a historic structure. Those risks being what it would take to actually modernize an existing school, and it's not to say that it's not possible or not possible. It's just a matter of having knowns versus unknowns. So looking at the actual diagram, there's a lot of interesting opportunities. Connecting the through street with Waverly gives you an opportunity for interior circulation, which none of the sites have. So, potential location for connections and drop-offs is sort of part of an enhanced pedestrian experience. But some similar potential opportunities for looking at improving pedestrian crossings on 31st here, as well as Howell, making sure that we have safe pedestrian crossings in those locations. Some challenges would be that the property is similar to the other two sites, but also need to be rezoned, which requires additional time and money. The track and field would be relocated in this instance to Powell Park. So there would be additional construction costs to build a new field associated with that.
Negotiations.
And the site is pretty steep in terms of its grading. The corner on Powell is considerably lower than the street at that corner, so it might have a complicated street relationship, which we could certainly solve through design, but something to consider.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay, so thank you for letting us just kind of like get through that baseline information and great feedback already that we're getting. I think that, what time are we supposed to be ending?
We're supposed to end at 8, so we'll get.
So I'm thinking maybe we make an executive decision here that, we were going to have you all rotate through every single station here, but given that we have 10 minutes, we want to respect everyone's time. Perhaps what we were gonna do is switch that a little bit and say that, gonna reiterate that we're focusing on properties that PPS owns, so that we have a pathway, for the project with our current knowledge. And there's awesome opportunities for reconsidering how they were used. So in looking at the site approach 1, 2, and 3 in terms of where the main building is located, we would love your help to document the things that have been said. We've been taking notes, but still I think feel that to reiterate. On each site, there's a comment board next to each. Around the room, there is a board that contains the same information and a little bit more detail than I reviewed up here about each site approach. And what we're gonna ask you to do in a minute, not quite yet, but in a minute, is sort of get out and go to a board, go to a site option. There's just 3 boards, 3 site approaches, and try to get to each one of them in the 10 minutes, but if you need to focus on just 1 or 2, that's fine. And we'd love to understand where is your input, what feels like your highest priority, what are the opportunities and challenges that you see, and I know it's easy to focus on challenges, and we definitely want to hear those things, but what are also the opportunities and the exciting things about the moment in time that we're in, where we get to kind of step back and think about the approach to utilizing these really great sites that make a wonderful campus for Cleveland, and how can you help us make sure that our brains have what's in your brain, so that when we come back to you again with additional levels of detail in subsequent meetings, that we can be responsive and provide you the additional input you're looking for. Again, this is not the last time that we are looking at these site approaches. We will spend at least a couple of more meetings talking about these in further levels of detail. And thank you for your excitement about it.
And in the interest of time, we're gonna go ahead and show you what our next steps are going to be. So on November 29th, we are actually gonna invite everyone here to take a tour of Lincoln High School. That tour is on a weekday, I believe it's a Wednesday, and that would be from 6 to 8. Then we are looking at taking a tour of Grant High School on Thursday, November 30th, from 5:30 to 7. Then on December 2nd, which is a Saturday, if a weekend works better for you than a weekday night, we're gonna tour both Grant and Lincoln High School. Grant in the morning, Lincoln in the afternoon. December 5th, we have our 3rd CPC 3 meeting, and before that, we plan to take a little tour of Cleveland High School itself. Currently, we're showing December 16th as the Cleveland Public Design Workshop. I think that is in question, but that's what we're holding at this time. And then all the way into January 2024, we've got our CPC meeting 4 scheduled.
Do you want all of us at that public design workshop?